So as I say, this is Tom Kerr of Aura. Welcome to today's Aura seminar. Normally, of course, we would be sitting together comfortably in the splendid surrounds of the RAF Club in London, but the breakdown, of course, prevents us from doing so. So this is our first Zoom seminar brought to you by the power of Zoom. We'll be bringing Aura to you in the comfort of your home or your office, or your sun lounger, or wherever you happen to be, and whatever state of dress you happen to have chosen. Though we've had to change the medium, we will of course adhere to the key principles of Aura's seminars and webinars, and that is to ensure that you leave the event with learnings you can immediately put into practice. So in this, the first of today's triplet of webinars, you'll hear two case studies. The first presentation will be delivered by Jeremy Hollow, who's founder and MD of Listen and Learn Research, and Shobhan Smith, Market Research Manager at the British Red Cross. You can see up on the screen this very moment. The second presentation will be presented by Nikki Carrott, MD of Sherbet Research. So in this first presentation by Jeremy and Shobhan, you'll hear how the British Red Cross learned to talk to people about loneliness. Jeremy posits that social media data is being poorly used. Social listening is an insight, it's field work. It's happening in silos, limited by superficial analytics with little grounding in research. So Jeremy and Shobhan intend to welcome us to the qual side of social data. Jeremy and Shobhan's presentation will be followed by a presentation from Nikki Carrott of Sherbet Research. After this, at 10:30 roughly, we'll have a question and answer session for 20 minutes. So please use the tab at the bottom of the Zoom screen to submit your questions during the presentations. Okay, that's enough from me. I'm now going to hand you over to Jeremy and Shobhan. Jeremy, Shobhan, over to you.
Tom, thank you so much, and welcome to everyone to the seminar. It's lovely to be able to have this opportunity to talk to everyone, and delighted to be able to go first. It's such a cheerful, happy topic to start, but there is some light. I'm going to start really by talking about the issue that we addressed with this work. And given that everything that's going on right now, the problem of loneliness feels all the more pressing and all the more important. It's one of those things that we'll talk about a bit later, is that people can feel lonely, whether they're on their own or if they're with other people. And at the moment, with most of us stuck at home, these feelings are likely to become even more intense. We can be locked down in the very situation that created our loneliness, with fewer avenues for release or respite. But on the other hand, this is happening while many of us are on the other side of loneliness, and we're rediscovering the value of our social connections. If I'm honest, there have been times in my life when I've been lonely, really lonely. The isolating, no hope, sapping kind of lonely. I felt it growing up at school and at university, and oddly even in the midst of a loving family. And despite what my mum may want to believe, there's nothing actually special about me. We all get lonely sometimes. The problem is, it's really hard to talk about it. Social norms are stacked against us. There's this big stigma that it's a weakness or a failure. It's the loner, someone no one wants to be or to be with. And then on the other hand, we have the stereotype of the lonely widow, sitting alone, gazing forlornly out of the net curtains. Or it's that person at the party, the one sitting alone. We mask loneliness, we lock it away, we don't talk about it. And all this means that it's hard for us to be honest with ourselves or to open up and to trust others with it in real life and when talking to researchers. It's also hard to notice it in others. We don't always recognize the masks people wear or have the empathy, the sensitivity or the courage to act. And at a societal level, we lack the confidence, the permission or the safe spaces to talk about it openly. It's not defined or understood properly, which makes it harder for us to develop the right tools and the right language for dealing with it. But there is an exception. There is a space where people do talk about their loneliness. It's a place where their anonymity makes them brave, somewhere they don't feel this shame. It's the kind of place where kindred spirits meet, people who have been there, people who are willing to listen. I'm talking now about the quieter spaces on social media. It's the lively thread on an obscure website. It's the corners of Mumsnet. It's the brave shout on Twitter. This session is going to share why the British Red Cross wanted to remove the mask, to end the charade, to give us all the ability to recognise and do something about loneliness. At the same time, we also wanted to show you how social data, when used properly, can help connect us with the people in ways that traditional research can't. Over to Siobhan.
Hi, Good morning, everyone. So as Jeremy was saying, British Red Cross needed to find out how people talk about loneliness and understand much more about it. This is because we were going to launch a new campaign to raise awareness of the importance and impact of loneliness. Just a little bit of context, because it's probably for those of you who know anything about British Red Cross, it may not seem like the most natural fit. This came about because of a partnership with the Co-op to put together a campaign and services to tackle loneliness. And the reason it was a really good fit with British Red Cross's mission and our work, particularly in the UK, but around the world as well, is it's about connecting human kindness with human crisis. And encouraging resilient communities, so people who will join together to look after each other, which is, as we've seen recently, needed much more than ever. So our overall aims were to create a campaign to raise public awareness and understanding of what loneliness is, where to find it, and how to describe it. To initiate services and schemes which will really help tackle loneliness, and also, very importantly, to influence policy, because loneliness had become a really big topic in public policy. Let's move on to why we were particularly interested in social listening. Our campaign was not entirely, but would largely find itself on the social space. So generally, with regard to loneliness, we knew quite a lot of the more superficial stuff about, through polling, about what people think about other people who are lonely, who people think are the people who would be lonely, which probably didn't give us enough information to talk credibly in this space. And at the other end of the spectrum, we'd done a lot of social research into the experience of chronically lonely people, people who are trapped in the bubble of loneliness, as the title of our report. And this was exactly the journey that we wanted to look into, to find out in people's own words and through their own lived experiences, how to avoid people getting that far along the journey, and how to equip other people to recognize loneliness. And to step up and talk about it, or to offer their support. So what we needed to do is we needed to be able to challenge the accepted stereotypes that Jeremy's already mentioned, like older people, for example, and show it can happen to anybody, to shine a light on the journey into loneliness, and to equip people to recognize it and to talk about it. And most importantly, that was starting with ourselves in the British Red Cross, because this was sort of a new area of focus for us, and we really needed to be confident that we had all the right understanding and language and the authority and credibility to almost play in the space, to take a flippant turn of phrase. So why social listening? Well, traditional research methods really struggle to reach these audiences because the experience of loneliness is so sensitive, so personal, and so isolating. However, we recognise that the veil of anonymity which can be allowed by social media helps people to share their stories, so that we can find out how it feels through their own words and reflect that and take it in, understand it. So that was where we came to work with Listen and Learn. So to go quickly to the objectives again, we were releasing a campaign to broaden understanding of loneliness and to encourage support. But this needed to be grounded in truths about how people experience loneliness and what causes it. So specific research questions: what causes loneliness? In what context does it arise, and in which situations? What is it that different types of lonely people need? What are their issues and their challenges to potentially coming out of that, or to just stepping up and saying, I need some help? How do the lonely see themselves? And who are they? What kinds of people are they? And how does their loneliness manifest itself? Really importantly, the language of loneliness, so that we can reflect back and show that we really understand how it feels. How do people find the words to express the way they're feeling? And then really importantly as well, particularly for service development, how have people overcome loneliness? What works for them? And then what are our main creative opportunities to engage with people about it? And then I have to say, sort of with a pure researcher's hat on, that alongside this, the research team just was really interested in the idea of qualitative data through social insights. And we wanted to test the potential of this as a reliable method for creating new consumer insights. And this seemed to be a really good theme to start with. So, Jeremy, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. I'd like to start with just a couple of observations about social data, not that I have a soapbox to stand on or anything, and really how it can be used for what I think is serious research, i.e. what you guys are all about. Social data has been around for a while, but I think for most people it seems to have been more than a curse than a blessing, which I think is a real shame. And looking back at the impact that we've had for our clients using this resource, I'd argue it's an essential part of the research toolkit. I think the value of social data lies in a very simple idea, and that's that people don't talk to researchers in the same way that they talk to each other. And that's not a criticism. I think we've done amazing things with the tools we've had to work with, but from the birth of market research, we've been the ones asking the questions, and we've been expecting people to respond to what we are interested in. This doesn't happen with social data. Social captures what people want to talk about. In a very real sense, it's their agenda, not ours. They talk freely. And this is the promise of social data. It gives us a chance to capture this more personal, natural side of life. It's a different perspective. It's a move away from a reliance on stated preferences. On one hand, it's a way to explore very difficult concepts like living with loneliness. On the other, it's a valuable way of seeing the everyday in a new light. I think we need to challenge some of the assumptions that we have built up around social media research. It feels like we've been sold the quick dream, the promise of instant insight, the idea that we can tap into a rich stream of human insight through data, that social listening would give us the ability to keep our finger on the pulse. Instead, what we've been getting so far is superficial information. And when this happens, we feel people are frustrated, they feel let down, they're left with more questions than answers and are confused about what it all means. And I think importantly for our sector, we're seeing social data being poorly used, misapplied, and decisions taken on the back of what is questionable data, which then in turn has been questionably analysed. And as Tom said at the beginning, social listening isn't insight, it is fieldwork. Too often it happens in silos, frequently outside of research and insight teams, driven by analytics with little grounding in research. This is a massive and missed opportunity. Social data needs the skills, interests, and passion of research and insight professionals. This session is about showing what can be achieved when social data is used properly and how it can help organizations and the people they serve. I've just told you that most people are doing social wrong, so I guess I'd better have a strong alternative. I just want to spend a couple of moments thinking about how to approach social data from almost a conceptual level. If we want real depth of insight and opportunity, we need to rid ourselves of this real-time addiction. We don't expect traditional methods to deliver instant gratification. If we treat social data the same way, we will get much better results. Here's how we tend to think of it. It's confusing, messy, chaotic, constantly evolving, and there's tons of it. It's a vast ocean of human experience, deep with meaning and connection. It's also full of false positives and total nonsense. There are two ways I think you can approach it. You can be a speed skater or a free diver. The speed skaters are your social listening analysts. They fly across the data quickly, looking for answers. Their track is well defined and it's hard for them to really step out of their lane. The tools of the speed skater are word clouds and engagement metrics, and this can be good for measuring campaign performance and reach, but it's rarely that insightful. The freediver, on the other hand, dances to the beat of a different drum. They're free to explore the depths, to follow the data, to immerse themselves in the experiences and stories of thousands of people. Their tools are what researchers have been using for years, just adapted to thrive in this new world. They work directly with the data, not the metrics. They do justice to the range and depth of human expression captured in social data. We believe that research teams should have freedivers on board. You may have guessed it, we're a bunch of freedivers, and we've developed a different, what we think is a more human approach to creating insight from social data. a way to boil down thousands of different experiences to reveal the common threads. It's an approach that combines qual skills to identify themes, expressions, and meaning with quant skills to find and understand patterns and relationships in the data. All this can be done in-house if you've got the right mix of skills and time, or you can work with the right agency, just as you might with other research projects. Here's a little bit about how we go about it. We start by exploring, working with our clients or stakeholders to really understand the context and the opportunity which is driving the need for insight. And this can be to answer big strategic questions, like the ones we're being asked about a lot at the moment are, what are the scenarios and opportunities for us as we come out of COVID? It can also be the desire to understand the customer experience and how well are we meeting their needs. Or, as was the case for the British Red Cross, it can be the need to understand the meaning of complex emotional issues and how to respond with the right comms, services, and products that meet these needs. The difference here that the solution starts with your objectives, not a rigid tech platform. The next step is how we collect the data. And there are a number of things that we should keep in mind here. Social data isn't that rep, and it's never going to be. I don't believe that this is where the true value lies. Another thing to note is that people tend to talk about social media as if it is just one thing. It isn't. Each social space is different in how people use it, the social norms that surround it. A lot of this comes from who is connecting through the platform, what they use it for, and the levels of anonymity. And the final point just to make about data in here is that the data quality checks you get with listening tools are very patchy. You will get a lot of irrelevant results which need to be dealt with. In this way, data from social is still very immature. With this in mind, a social insight project needs data, and we use social listening platforms. As I mentioned, I think they're a fieldwork tool, and we top it up with our own data collection where needed. These tools use keywords to collect relevant data. For example, you can search for apples and oranges and exclude pineapples, and this will return data that helps you make a grapefruit salad. Doing this process, although I gave a really simple example, needs some technical ability. Each of the listening platforms have a different approach to doing it, and you need some experience and some skills about how to make that really work for you. You also need a really good linguistic frame of mind and the skill sets around that, so how to frame and the right keywords and how to really, this is our field work, so how to collect that data in the right way. It's something that needs some trial and error, it needs some skill development. And you need to think about how language works in the right way in order to try and capture that. When we look at things like the complex topics like loneliness, we tend to work really closely with our clients to ensure that we define between us what the thing is that we're looking at, i.e. in this way, what is loneliness, exactly how we are defining it, and then what does it mean in the different contexts, and where the boundaries are, what is and what isn't the thing that we're looking at. It's really, really crucial. That's the thing that makes sure that we look in the right places and in the right way. For example, you could just be interested in acute loneliness, or it could be chronic loneliness, or it could be a mixture of the two. To give you a really practical example, in a world where we are at the moment, where one day seems to blur into another, we're looking at what people are getting excited about. We started the project and we got into it and we started struggling to get decent data out of it. There was such a massive amount of emotional outpouring, but a lot of it lacks any richness or detail on context. It's worthless. There's nothing to it. So then we were struggling and we were thinking about it and we're experimenting. And then we hit on this idea of linking our emotional terms with concrete and abstract notions of time. And that actually was the key that we needed to unlock to get the content that we wanted to do and to get relevant data. So I suppose what we're trying to say is the data is rich, the data is there. It's hard to get at sometimes, and it needs some skills and it needs some patience and some practice. You have to experiment and think about how language works. You don't want to skew the results, but you want to capture the best data possible. After all, we're listening, not asking. We're not in the room. This way of capturing data is one of the strengths of social. It lets you see what you don't know to ask. Now it's time to start making sense of the data. And this is where we put the machines firmly aside and use people to understand people. Our data collection has given us thousands of comments, but the only thing they have in common is that they match the keywords we used. So we need a plan to help us make sense of it all. We use a grounded approach to the analysis. And in practice, this goes through a number of steps. So we start by reading a sample of the comments to uncover the different signals being conveyed in each. These could be experiences, opinions, emotions, context, really any way that people express what they mean. We look for as many different expressions as we can. Basically, we just keep going until we start running out of new ones. Then, using this grounded approach, we start grouping these signals together into broad categories. And for the British Red Cross work, this included areas such as this idea of sense of connectedness, how connected people are. There were a range of different loneliness triggers which started that element of loneliness, and there was a range of different emotional responses. Each of those formed our categories. This gave us a way to categorize and organize the data, which lets us then start to make sense of it. The final step here is we read a large sample of social data, categorizing it as we go, giving us what we need to properly analyze it. Now, this process is essential, but it is just the beginning. It gives us what we need to analyze the data quantitatively. Here's where we look at the frequencies, we identify patterns, and look at the relationships between our variables. For example, in this project, we saw a relationship emerging between the triggers of loneliness and people's level of connectedness, which gave us the beginnings of our personas. This process also helps show us where the strong and the weaker signals are, which then guides our deeper analysis. Running alongside the quant work is this more qualitative deep dives. We use thematic analysis techniques to explore the meaning behind what we're seeing in the data. For example, this means looking deep at the different loneliness triggers, getting our heads around how they operate, why they're different, and how they might feel. And this is how we get to the why things are happening and the emotions that lie beneath. And the final part of this process is to bring the quant and the qual together, synthesize it all to draw out a broader narrative, work out what the implications are, and see the opportunities. So moving on to some of the results, what did we find? Well, given our reticence to talk about loneliness, the first thing we noticed was the scale of the social conversation about it. We found thousands of people talking about it and sharing their experiences. What's taboo offline seems more open for discussion on social. And we learned a lot about it, where the conversation was taking place, when it happens during the day, why people turn to social, why they are suffering alone, what triggers their feelings of loneliness, the people and the parts of life it affects, what it feels like, what people need, how they talk about and express themselves, and to Siobhan's point earlier, how some people have overcome it. And we can't possibly cover all of that today, so we're going to just pick on a few highlights. The first thing we found is that loneliness is not one thing. Rather, it's a complex and subtle experience. Its nature is determined by, one, a range of different situational drivers, what's happening to people, what's happening around them. And the second thing is a sense of a person's connectivity, who they're connected to, and the quality of those relationships. So looking at these situational drivers to begin with, loneliness is driven by a range of deeply personal individual factors. However, there are some recurring themes that go across these individual experiences. The first one is about relationships, and loneliness can be brought about by changing dynamics in their relationships with other people, their family, their friends, their partners. Health can also be an important driver, changing or declining health, whether that's physical or mental, and the impact of that can also create loneliness. Life stage can also be important and have an impact. Are you becoming a parent, graduating, being at university, your work or your career? And lastly, changes to your physical environment, i.e. moving house, changes to the local infrastructure, transport links or services can all serve to make people feel more lonely. Those situational drivers occur within the context of a person's sense of connectedness. And actually the biggest group, 59% of the sample that we looked at, were actually people connected with other people and still feeling lonely. So the connected feel alone despite having social connections around them. Often these connections are misfiring or they're damaged. And then the other side is the disconnected, who feel separated from others, with little to no social connections. Relationships with others have broken down or simply not made in the first place, which makes me think a lot about what's happening right now and how some of these people might be experiencing this and how this might be exacerbated by the situation. Bringing those two dimensions together gave us a broad typology of loneliness with a set of different personas that emerged between those. The first of these that I was going to just talk about is new parents. So this is a group who are feeling lonely while being connected. So something happens, either during pregnancy or the early years of the child's life. The child's dependency is limiting their social time and access to their existing friendships. It's disrupting familiar routines, lifestyle, and challenging their role in life or their perception of that role. These changing dynamics, or this leads into a sense of changing dynamics. The world is shrinking with fewer connections. Isolation can start to creep in. They're missing their friendships, they're missing their colleagues. Friendships can become strained if others do not have children and don't really understand that what's happening to them. Some find their new identity and lifestyle as a parent hard to accept. The idealized expectations of parenthood aren't really the reality. These factors push them into loneliness. It makes them feel like they have no one to turn to or to talk to. The relationships show strain. Partners don't seem to understand or help. They may choose to isolate themselves for fear of judgment from others, fear of being seen as an imperfect parent, not being able to cope, or ashamed of a misbehaving child, which then makes them feel guilty. They have a conflict between their needs, i.e. to rest, to go out, to get more support, and the needs of their child. And it also makes them feel alone, with no one to talk to honestly about their struggles with parenting, no one who really understands without judging. The second persona we wanted to share was from the other side, which is around being a student, which is about feeling lonely while feeling disconnected. So the trigger that starts here is something happens, they've joined a new school, they may have started being bullied at the school they're at, or they've moved to a different area. It's a struggle to make friends. They find it hard to meet people. It's something they may have struggled with throughout their life. The change dynamics here is that they've lost old friends. They find it hard to integrate into established groups and existing friendship circles. They can feel unable to make friends even when they get the chance. They just don't know what to do. This pushes them into loneliness. Unsuccessful attempts at meeting people impact on their confidence and make it make it worse, detracts their sense of self-worth and can drive loneliness, which makes them feel despair. They just don't know what to do. They feel excluded. They're on the outside looking in, lacking the social networks which would grant them access. They feel like they've missed the boat. For older groups, are feeling that the window for making friends has passed. And just the final point from us is around this experience and language of loneliness. As you can see from some of the quotes, the language of loneliness is really rich with emotion. We found a broad spectrum of negative feelings, ranging from sadness to depression, these feelings of being lost or hopeless. The most common reactions to loneliness were around how they feel about their relationships to others. And here we're getting the language of feeling abandoned, the sense of being invisible to others. There's also a physiological impact to loneliness, and it's expressed and manifests itself in a sense of fatigue, exhaustion, and tiredness. Then there's the outlook for the future. It is much more likely to be bleak and pessimistic, but actually for some optimistic, particularly those who are no longer lonely, who have managed to overcome these feelings. Their self-perception, it usually takes a hit. It's a dent on their self-value and image. They can feel aggression, frustration, resentment, angry feelings directed at others, and a lot feel isolated. The language is also rich with metaphor. It helps people express themselves when they can't find the words. So as an example, I never used to get lonely or depressed, but now I feel the magic I once had for life has disappeared. One of the most exciting outputs from this work was a clear and rich model for building creative concepts that would resonate with the lonely in all of their guises, something that would speak to the lonely and those around them who might not be aware. Back to you, Siobhan.
Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, so I think through everything that Jeremy's just said now, and he's gone into some detail to describe the process that he took, and it really is a very intensive process for analysing this information. In some senses, it has to be experienced to be believed. You can see also how compelling and engaging the insights are that come out of this. Because in the case of this particular case study, it's kind of all about all of us. What we got from it, the result that we got out of it, was it helped us to understand, as Jeremy's just talked about, what lonely people need, and the categorization, the typologies of loneliness is a really helpful framework for us to take forward, and is referred to throughout all our campaigns since then. So what we learned was that people who are experiencing loneliness need a safe place to share what they're going through, where it's okay to talk about what they feel. But they need to be able to talk to somebody who understands them and what they're going through, and they need to feel that they're understood. And that's why it's so important for us to hear from their own mouths and to understand within their own situations what it feels like, to be able to reflect the language back to them during the campaign. They need to be able to articulate how they feel, to give it a name to the problem, and understand what it is, and to feel reassured that there is a way through it. And they also need help to develop strategies to cope and overcome their feelings of loneliness. And this was one of the things that the social listening helped with. It also uncovered the advice that they were giving to each other, people who had got through it or had tried different strategies. So they needed to hear how others in similar situations have managed and what worked, and how they could apply this to their lives. And for us, how we could develop services and information that would help them to do this. Okay, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll just flip on and show the video if that's okay, if you bear me a second.
Jeremy, it may just be me here in Edinburgh, but there seems to be no activity on the screen.
Did not work.
The video doesn't seem to have worked.
Oh, that's a real shame.
Yeah. Shall I just go on?
Yeah, can you not see this screen?
You can see the screen with the creative written on it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so give me 2 seconds. Okay, it's not. Sorry, apologies. Are we okay for time, Tom?
We're just over 4 minutes over at the moment, so it'd be good to wrap up shortly.
Have I got? Can we have 2 minutes?
You have 2 minutes, and then
can you see this? Can you see the screen now?
Yes. It being a baby in a swing.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Apologies.
No worries.
Sorry, let me just get back. Okay. Siobhan?
Okay, that's a good example of the curse of technology. So the on YouTube, the campaign that you've just seen in a rather unfortunately jerky form is a lot more fluid and engaging than that. But just a quick word on the impact, the immediate impact of the work that Listen and Learn did for us in social listening was to equip our teams in marketing, policy, fundraising and operations to talk credibly, empathically and authentically about loneliness and socialization, using the right language for the right scenarios and finding case studies for campaigning which would resonate. Then from a KPI point of view, we, as a result of the campaign, we saw a significant uplift in positive perceptions of British Red Cross and in consideration to support by various means, with volunteering, donating, lending their voice. Thousands of people signed up to become community reserve volunteers at that time, which meant offering to share their kindness with isolated people, among other things. And more recently, tens of thousands more have done so. And just a final word from me, that we've continued to work with Listen and Learn on various subjects throughout the last 18 months, in this case to understand how our campaigns have landed in the social space. I think that was all I had to say. It was a real learning for us of the value of social insights.
Thank you, and sorry for running over slightly.